Hello, Reluctant Messenger Unleashed Nation. Welcome to episode 20 as we cover chapter 9, Ascended Masters. I'm your host, Donna Rebido, and with me is author Candice Sanderson.
Welcome back, everyone. Glad to see you.
Candy, there's so much about this chapter that coincides with my NDEs, some visions, some books I've read, that it's really a powerful chapter for me. Everyone, let's go open our books. We're going to go to chapter 9, page 167, Ascended Masters. It's one of the shortest chapters in the book, but very powerful. And I hope it's powerful for you. My first question, Candy, has to do with you still working. You're working and you're also going into these other realms. And I'm just curious about, were you conflicted? How were you able to navigate these realms?
That's an interesting question, Donna. Initially, I would have to say, yes, I really was conflicted. My life had turned upside down when I started channeling. Here I was receiving messages from the world of spirit, but I couldn't bring it back. I couldn't bring that knowledge back without it really changing me. I had to find a balance between that 3D world that I lived in and that beautiful world of spirit that I was visiting quite often. For example, let me tell you what I did. I would be called to crisis duty. That would be when a staff member or a student would pass away. It was frustrating because I couldn't share what I knew to be true, that their peer or their teacher still existed. They were just beyond our physical dimension. Instead, I would implement exercises to work with the students. And depending on their age, for those of us on the crisis team, many times we would have them write a letter or draw a picture for the student or the teacher who had passed. We would encourage them as they did this to tell us their favorite memory and let them realize that their memories are still there and they could actually help carry them through these difficult times. But in my mind, I knew that the one who had passed was more than likely right there, observing them in real time. Now, I couldn't say that, of course, but I knew that the actions we were taking were helping both the ones left behind and the ones that had passed on, because it brought forth that energy of love and compassion and caring. Normally, if there was a meeting that required my attendance, that meant there was a conflict between teachers and parents. So what I would do is send my energy from my heart to all of the participants during the meeting. Because I was learning to sense and actually see energy, I could visualize how it helped. I saw the energy and I saw it as it affected the other people and softened their feelings. This isn't something I could verbally share, but my actions helped others, whether they knew it or not. So I guess you could say, Donna, that I was really learning to manage my conflicts. I knew things that I could not openly share, especially during work. So I found these workarounds to be able to live and function in both this beautiful world of energy and this beautiful world of the physical.
That's a great answer. I wonder, that makes sense to me that you could do that. And yeah. Candy, let's go ahead and look about how we got to this chapter. So it's a little bit of a recap. And we started out, we learned about the flower message, the mystical experience with the royal poinciana tree. We've learned about points of existence. I love that dot. Everyone that's watching this should know how much I love that dot. How can we travel beyond what we think of as time? And we've picked up tools for our consciousness awareness toolbox. And I love that. We learned about right before this chapter 8, the crystalline grid. We've also learned about the ladder of enlightenment. There's so much that we've learned. But there's something different about this chapter. But you kind of introduced it in chapter 8, the crystalline grid. That's when you saw Jesus standing in front of you saying, right, "Let not your heart be troubled." But this was just the beginning of the extraordinary encounters with ascended masters but there was a little bit of a delay. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes, Donna, I had that image of Jesus saying, "Let not your heart be troubled," while I was at Unity Church of Naples. That was in September of 2014. School had begun a few weeks before, and that first of the year honeymoon period was over. We were back in full swing. My work schedule was crazy busy, so much so, Donna, that I hadn't realized almost 2 months had passed before I realized the messengers were silent. I mean, I went from having multiple messages each day to nothing. And I thought, have they gone? I've learned a few things since then. First of all, my schedule changed. And as I reflect on that, I realized I no longer had that very convenient 12-minute early morning commute. That's when the messages would begin. Get in the car. It was standard operating procedure. Buckle up, crank the engine, and turn on the voice recorder. I always knew I could connect. And just think about all these tools that we've gathered. We could use the heart to expand our POE, our point of existence. We could use that ladder of enlightenment to rapidly expand into that energy field that surrounds us. But I've always loved that little surprise when I would receive a message without asking. That seemed to stir my soul. But instead of me taking time to connect, I was so caught up in the day-to-day activities of work and home that I hadn't even realized there was silence. On page 168 and 169, I talk about some messages. The first few came as a download, and the last message, which you'll see on 169, was an actual message. But these were from Jesus, and he started talking about the earth being filled with light workers, those whose energy fields had higher vibrational frequencies than the others.
You know, on these pages, Candy, you talk about light workers and healing. And my question for you is, do light workers know that they're light workers? Because I think I might be one to been called. I've been called to heal a friend with ALS. And am I a light worker? How do I find out?
Well, first of all, the messages say that light workers will alter energy waves.
Okay.
They quote, adjust the person's energy to align with the frequencies of health and well-being. Donna, you epitomize what a light worker is. There are many energy healers, people who use Reiki, for example. But when I think of your work as an acupuncturist, isn't that exactly what you're doing?
Yeah.
Precisely. You're clearing blockages. You're opening the flow of vital energy throughout the body. You are literally aligning others to the frequencies of health and well-being. And when you had your NDE, you spent time in that non-physical realm of energy, and your energy body and your POE, your awareness was there. It changed you. It woke dormant skills. It brought you a new focus. You know, since we began this series, we've become good friends. You're one of the few people who are like me when we meditate. I close my eyes, but I can do this with my eyes open. I can do it when I'm reading a book. I can do it when walking, watching TV, anytime. You can separate your awareness. But when I take a deep breath, my POE, my point of existence, shoots out from my body. And I usually hang out in the cosmos, playing among the stars. I can even peek into the space station, and I zoom past these unknown galaxies. I see myself becoming and feel myself becoming part of all that is. I taste cosmic consciousness, and I bask in the energy of life itself. Life. Not just what we experience in our three-dimensional bodies, but true life. And you, Donna, are the only one I know that does this too on a regular basis. And just like with your NDE, When we spend time in these non-physical realms where our angels and guides reside, we change. We return to our physical bodies and we're different. It's just like when you return from your NDE, you transformed. That NDE was a jumpstart to you becoming a full-fledged light worker.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I guess, like you said, we're becoming good friends and we see things in each other. So I would have to say that's really powerful for me. Thank you, Candy. Let's go to page 169. It's December 2014, and you've been channeling for about 16 months now. And most of the messages have come through you through dictation, but now we're changing a little bit and it's now becoming a download. So I'd like you to just take a few minutes and just talk a little bit about the difference between this dictation and this download, what it was all about.
I remember when this message came, you're right, it was a download. I can tell you exactly where I was standing. I was in my kitchen over the sink, literally slicing tomatoes for a salad. And all at once, this came. Downloads are complete and full, just like a computer download. It was Jesus. He was in and out in a flash. So I stopped what I was doing, went directly to the computer and started typing what I received. This was December 11th, and Jesus started talking about how many people would be celebrating his upcoming birth. He then talked about ascended masters, and about halfway down on page 168, he describes them as a group of souls who share higher vibrational energies, frequency patterns that closely align with Source. As souls progress, their vibrations become entrained, matching Source frequencies, and their ascension quickens. Those closest to Source are considered to be ascended masters, such as himself, Jesus, and the Buddha. In this contact and in a dictated message 11 days later, we'll see on that next page on December 22nd, Jesus talks about the vibrational states with people on earth who are light workers and how that healing occurs by altering energy waves. That first paragraph ends with this sentence: recognition that thought forms are real is the first step in learning to manifest reality. As they progress closer to Creator Source, the energy frequencies become subtler, finer, and lighter.
You know, Candy, when you were reading that statement about that recognition that thought forms are real, and it's very true, and it's what Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches and what my friends are doing when they manifest. But when I read that part about as they progress closer to the source, the energy frequency becomes subtler, finer, and lighter. I could actually feel this. So it's not just a thought form, but it's also a feeling.
Donna, that is so cool. You know, I realize how much I have learned from the messengers in such a short period of time. And now I'm able to hear things like this, using energy for healing, actually measuring enlightenment by someone's vibrations. These ideas would have never entered my mind before, but now they seemed logical. This correlation between enlightenment and energy frequencies, it was quantifying, it was measuring what I thought was immeasurable. And this certainly appealed to my analytical mindset of being a psychologist. What I really loved was the first few sentences in the messages, and let me read that to you again on page 169. Light workers on the earth plane are able to sense and manipulate energy in order to affect change. Their environment can be changed. People can be healed. Hearts can be mended. This is powerful. This is empowerment. It brought me back to that miraculous healing the year before. In 2013, I had a documented medical miracle when my paralyzed vocal cord was healed overnight without medical intervention. I thought of the healers that had worked on me at Monroe Institute. Donna, were they light workers? Had they manipulated my energy field to heal me? And think of the word light workers. What a beautiful name. People who use the energy frequency of light for the betterment of humanity. And there are so many of them. I can guarantee you that many of us have next door neighbors who are light workers, yet we don't know it. I've referred to many people as silent gurus. They may not be, quote, front and center in their spirituality, but they are just as significant. As you pass them on the street, their smile brightens your day. Just being around them makes you feel better. And yet, here they are, and they are on their path of ascension. What about these other terms that the messengers use to label others on this sacred path? They say they call them masters, prophets, saints, avatars, angels. But you know, Donna, they're not just labels. They represent an energy field of souls who are actively on the path of ascension. They are being drawn in by the love and the light of the Creator. So adding this quantifiable data, knowing that the difference between us and them is just their position on the path to enlightenment, was so powerful. It made me realize we all have the choice. We all have the opportunity to seek enlightenment. When we move, hopefully forward on this path, it's every choice that we make in life that puts us there. It's the basics of Earth School 101. It's all about the lessons we learn. Will our choices move us forward or keep us stuck? Do our actions make us regress? I hope not. But this too was so valuable. We are always learning, and our actions define who we are and who we are becoming. Most of us, I certainly know I was in this group, are oblivious to this. But when we realize how potent our actions are, when we act and respond from the heart, we begin to feel the results in real time. And as we communicate with love and gratitude, we begin to feel lighter. And I'm talking about physically feeling it, feeling uplifted. Maybe that's our angels or guides giving us a little nod, letting us know that we are on the path to enlightenment.
You know, Candy, there's two things that are really important here that I'd like to emphasize for people. And the first one you talked about was energy, and the second one was about choice. But with regard to energy and energy healing, since I am an acupuncturist, and I don't do Reiki, I do acupuncture. But I also have learned that Bill Bengtson energy cure, and so did Dr. Joe Dispenza. He actually read Dr. Bengtson's book, and we incorporate that now into what we call an energy cage. We put people physically, you're laying on the floor and there's 8 of us that go around you, and we're not touching you. We're using our energy to manipulate your energy to heal. So there's something really profound there where that the changes in health come in energy before they come into the physical. The physical is a much denser energy. So we heal at the higher vibratory energy. And the second thing about choice, and we talked about my near-death experience. And if you guys remember that when God was giving me a choice, I actually was given the choice. Do you want to stay with me or do you want to go back to earth? And I said something remarkable. I said, since you made me, I give you the choice. Now, as soon as I did that, I no longer had the choice. I gave it away. And so God said to me, you will go back and tell people the importance of your choice. So I want you all to realize the power in that, the power in the movement of that choice. And this is a really profound message from Jesus. And I love how he brings you what you need too. And that is, he brought you clarity. So it's energy, choice, and this clarity. He describes his meeting with you at the Unity Church, and we discussed that in the last episode, the crystalline grid, and he spoke to you and he said, let not your heart be troubled, followed by a vision of the life force energy, which is responsible for this ascension and this purity. And, you know, Candy, I did a double take when you read that last message, the last sentence, a vision of the life force energy responsible for ascension and purity. And he tells us now what this vision was about. And so I'm going to go back for a minute. Remember in chapter 8, where you were talking to us about the lotus blossom that grew from your heart? It turned into a torus field, and it changed from a pink lotus flower to a milky white crystalline structure. Jesus is telling us that the lotus blossom became life force energy. Energy, again, the important here. And that energy is responsible for ascension and purity. And he says it there, and you experienced it. So you made your choice to be open. You chose to write this book. You chose to tell us. You came. So you have these energies, responsibilities, and these choices. He says it right there. You experienced it. But can you tell us about the next vision that you had with Jesus? And in case people are a little bit lost, we're now on page 170, and you describe a vivid vision along with that message. And that's that September 27th, 2015 message. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Donna, this was so vivid. I was taking a morning walk when suddenly I found myself dropped into a scene that looked like it was out of Cecil B. DeMille's famous movie, The 10 Commandments. I was standing on a hillside. I was among throngs of people, all who were there to hear Jesus speak. His message is so powerful and empowering that I'm going to summarize part of what he said. He said, the first couple sentences, seek ye not the kingdom of heaven, for in seeking ye become lost. The kingdom of heaven is not outside of you, it is within. This message, along with the one on the previous page, gives us more important information. As we raise our vibrations, we ascend. Source calls to us like a magnet, and we are drawn into those energy frequencies. Jesus gives the key in the second message. It's not in seeking, Donna. It's in surrendering. It's going with the flow and allowing these higher vibrational energies to carry us closer to source. You certainly experienced that with your NDE.
Yeah, and the second part of the NDE that I want people to know about, it says he will go back and you will go back and tell people about choice. But it's really that surrendering. And what happened there was when I said, I give the choice back to you, he said, you'll now know what surrender means. It means I surrendered. I gave the choice. I don't know what was going to happen next. And it surrender to me meant I was setting aside myself. I set it aside. And I want you to know how that is important to me because I'm a remote viewer. And in the remote viewing process, at the beginning of your remote viewing, there's actually a part that says it's actually called set aside. And so you're sitting down, and before you get the coordinates, you have to set aside all the things that are blocking you that day. You actually physically have to write it down and then say it. I set aside my worrying about having to feed the dogs. I set aside my grocery list. I set aside all of this so I can surrender to the flow. I set everything aside. So surrender, choice and surrender are really deeply meaningful to me. So I love that he talked about. It's in the surrendering, setting aside yourself to allow the flow.
Donna, I learned so much from you. I'm so appreciative. But what you're talking about, what you use in remote viewing to set aside, that's perfect. That's just like Monroe Institute's energy conversion box. You have a place to put these distractions. You set them away from you so that you can really allow that energy to flow. With this message, it seemed to pull me deeper and deeper into the experience. I looked down, and although this was in my mind's eye, I saw sandals on my feet. I was wearing a long skirt, and it swept the dusty ground. I could literally feel hot air blowing across my face. Donna, it was more than just a vision. It felt like I had literally time traveled. Then the scene disappeared, and here I was, back on my morning walk in Naples, Florida. The next morning, the same thing happened again. I'm out for a walk, and suddenly I'm back where I was the day before, standing in that large crowd, waiting for Jesus to speak. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, and I recorded the September 28th, 2015 message. You'll see it on pages 171 and 172. Jesus asked if we recognized him as we walked across the earth. Did we see him when we felt the wind blow or when we heard a songbird sing? My POE was the observer, watching myself in the crowd. Tears flowed down my face when I realized he is in everything. He is everywhere. The message continued, saying that an awakening is here, and it's time to seek the kingdom of heaven from within. And with an analogy that brings us full circle to the first message on the top of page 172, he says that our Father planted a divine seed in our hearts, and those seeds are beginning to sprout. It's just like that flower, the flower of energy. I realize when we surrender to the process of awakening, we are releasing judgment and ego. And that's what helps guide us on this path to awakening. It's all about the surrender, just as you experienced, Donna, with your NDE.
Yeah, it is. It's that surrender, set aside all of that. Very true, Kenny. But that's not the last message you received from him that day.
No, it was actually later that afternoon while out walking again. I had this almost overwhelming scent of red wine. First of all, I am not a connoisseur of wine. I know people can smell wines and say it tastes like or smells like floral or whatever. I can't identify that at all. So the fact that I actually smelled something and realized it was red wine is remarkable. I know when we connect to the non-physical realms of energy, of spirit, we're using what the messengers sometimes refer to as our non-senses. We're using our senses in a non-ordinary way. After all, I had learned to hear without using my ears and see without using my eyes. But this was one of those times when the sense of smell was a precursor for a message. And as soon as I recognized that, my POE catapulted back to the days of Jesus. This time I was seated at a large wood table with Jesus and his disciples. My sense of smell was on high alert, and these exotic spices wafted through the air. Dinner was about to be served. The message starts about halfway down page 172, and it carries over to the next page. But Jesus starts the message by saying, "We break bread together, my dear ones, as we have throughout the sands of time for thousands of years."
You know, Candy, you probably don't know this. I'm just going to say how connected we are. But I've had this vision, and I feel like I time travel back to that same room. And I'm a small little girl. I have about shoulder length auburn hair, and I'm with my mom who's working in this kitchen. And I'm behind these curtains. I peek out to look into the room where people are eating. And I'm fascinated by what's going on in this room. And I would never share this or thought of this. And I have this vision over and over again. Recently, probably about the last 5 or 6 years, I'm not sure. but I get deeper into the vision like you, like all of a sudden I'm doing something, then I'm back behind the curtain, but all those smells and everything come back. And you probably know I was in that room. I was probably, if you were looking out, if you see a little girl in the curtain, that's me. But
And
please continue.
oh,
What?
I will, but before I continue, um, what we'll need to do is set us a time in the future, and we'll set the intention that when we go to sleep that night, because you can do so
Oh my
much more in your
gosh.
dreams, what
Yeah.
we'll do is we'll
Okay.
meet behind that curtain,
Oh my
and then
gosh.
we'll compare notes. Okay,
Okay.
that'll be fun. But oh my gosh, when you started talking about looking behind that curtain and being in that room and smelling all those spices, it gave me chills from head to toe. We are so connected on so many different levels. It's just unbelievable. Here we were in the same room, and I'm getting cold chills now as I'm saying this. But 2,000 years before, we were there. Oh my goodness. This is just so cool. It's like no wonder that we're connected. We've been together for lifetimes. Now, what's interesting is you and I have both been to Monroe Institute. And as I'm talking about this, I'm having this vision, and I am in Focus 27 with you. Focus 27 is that area that you go in Monroe Speak after you have transitioned. You and I are at the planning center, and that's where you connect with your soul group, with your family of soul members. And that's when you plan the blueprint for your next life. So, oh, cold chills all over. I see us both there, Donna. We are both beings of light, of energy, nothing but pure light. And we planned this. Oh my, we planned this. I'm not too sure we planned that it would reveal itself during this episode. But we planned this. This is one thing I love about doing these interviews with you, because we learn so much more. And, not only are we unleashing the stories behind the book, we're unleashing secrets about ourselves that we didn't even know. Oh my. But returning to the message, Jesus then gives thanks to his Father in saying it is he, the Father, who gave us life. He says that we're gathered to celebrate the ascension of humankind. And he says many others have awakened, yet there are many of us that have seeds of light that remain dormant. He pleads with us to become good shepherds and gently guide these back into the fold with love and compassion. He says that we will be the guiding stars, calling forth to those who are lost and who hunger for truth. And he ends this message by inviting the masses to join us from their deep sleep. He says the time for sleep is over and it's time to awaken. And at this point, my awareness faded from that beautiful table with Jesus and his disciples and you hiding behind the curtain. And I found myself back on the sidewalk in Southwest Florida on a late afternoon. Donna, it was so real.
It really, if people haven't experienced, it's very real. And we've talked about bilocation in the 5D, and that's what this was. It's something we all can do. And you can do it. And it happens a lot when you're daydreaming or going into the dream state or in the hypnagogic state. But let me give you an example of being a teacher. So I would always encourage my students to daydream, because if I'm giving a lecture and it triggers something in them and they can daydream, it helps their brains form that information into their memories. So it's really a good thing to do. So a lot of you guys, you're doing it anyway. You think, oh, Candy and Donnie, you're special, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not. It's something that you can do every day. That's why we're giving you these tools. And it's a form of bilocation in the 5D where your awareness is split. You're in the classroom listening to my lecture, but you're also daydreaming. There's somewhere else. So yeah, it can be very real.
Donna, that is so true. When we talk about the POE, that point of existence, we realize that, or I don't know that we realize it, but the messengers tell us that there is a continuum from here to there. And as we become more accustomed to using these tools that we have, we learn that we can manipulate our POE. We can tip the scale at will. It starts off with most of my awareness, for example. It was on the sidewalk as I took this afternoon stroll. Then that smell of red wine rocketed my POE into this scene with Jesus. Although we can learn to shift our POE, this happened to me spontaneously. I went from sidewalk to a dinner table with Jesus and his disciples like that. And think about it. This involved the element of time. I traveled back over 2,000 years. Donna, remember in chapter 3, Father Time, we learned that time is not linear. It is not a straight line from point A to point B. It's actually a rolling sine wave. And as our POE expands, it encompasses more of that timeline. And when that happens, we can experience both past and future events. And the larger we expand, the greater distances that we can travel in time. I can only say that I must have cranked up that dial, that slider button between A and B. It was as far away from my sidewalk as it could be.
Candy, I love that. There's so many things, like you said, about unleashing the book and unleashing our friendship are the tools. And the messengers not only give us different perspectives, but they show us the tools we can use. And in this case, remember the scent of wine slid your awareness back, and people can do this, you can control it. Yeah, you believe it, you can do it. But the sense of smell is most powerful memory. I can remember, so when I was a little kid, 4 years old, our house burned, and I didn't realize, but coming back in the house as a 4-year-old, you could smell the smoke. Okay. But you're 4, you don't remember that. And my family had such a good experience of people helping us after the fire that my dad started volunteering with the American Red Cross, but I had to wait till I was 16 to volunteer with him. And we were going on this call, and we actually entered a house that had burnt, and I'm standing in the middle of this house and I could smell that smoke. And as I was standing there, I slid back to being 4 years old, standing in my own home. And so that sense of smell is the most powerful gateway to memory and emotion. And we can put a link to an article that I found on YouTube from Harvard telling people about that. So you can use this power of smell to use that slider really quick. So you had some confirmation about this experience later that night, about your own. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Once again, Donna, it was through a book that just mysteriously appeared. And if you're following along, I'm on page 173, but a friend gave me a book called The God Self, Revelation for the New Millennium, written by Patricia Jimson Chuse. This book describes her dramatic spiritual awakening and her connection to God. I picked up the book and started reading it. I didn't have far to go before the cold chills started. The heading on page 2, Donna, in bold print, began with, "Break bread with me." My afternoon messages had started with that one statement. On page 172, it says, "We break bread together." So here comes the cold chills again. But it wasn't just that. As I read this book, there were so many similarities between what the author wrote and the messages I had just received. Again, this was one of those synchronicities that confirmed the messages, and I could just only shake my head with disbelief. It was unreal.
Yeah, we like to call it a God wink. You got these synchronicities, the wink from God, or God bumps, or yeah, that's crazy. I love it. After these conversations with Jesus, things got even more interesting. A couple of months after these first few messages, you found out about a place called Realms of Light. And so we're going to go over to page 174. And so you say that you saw yourself in a spontaneous vision. You were sitting in a lotus position. And instead of being in your living room, which is where your body was, that you were floating far above the earth, moving through a pastel pink and blue gelatinous substance. Now, Candy is like my NDE, where people would ask me, well, you didn't have a body. How could you, like those nonsenses? How can you see? How can you hear? And I had read in Bob Monroe's book, he was talking about this, and he said he felt the same way. And like you have a Jello mold, and so you pour the liquid Jello, your concoction into the mold, and you let it set. And when you, after it's been cold for a while, and you take it out, the Jello now looks like the mold. And so this really spoke about how it is on the other side, about this gelatinous substance. And I thought Bob Monroe was right on with that.
He certainly was. Donna, I've listened to your episode on your NDE. It's on your Exploring Consciousness podcast, episode number 10. And I've heard you talk about this Jello mold before, but I didn't remember that I had moved through a similar substance when I visited the realms of light. It's only when I reread this chapter for the interview that I realized it. It had no meaning before because I hadn't heard your story about the Jello mold. Again, I'm learning so much as we prepare for these episodes, and it gives us a different perspective. But back to page 174, that message, December 5th, 2015, one sentence, I am perfect balance and harmony. But this wasn't a statement from a messenger. It was me speaking as if I were a messenger. It was my voice coming from a space of balance and harmony, a space of perfection. I was floating in this sea of bliss. Remember, I'm in a lotus style, and this is in my mind's eye because my physical body would not allow me to get in a state of a lotus state. But I was beyond any margin of time. My POE was no longer the observer. It has slid all the way over. I was in that space where the messengers called the realms of light. I looked around and I saw ascended masters, from Buddha to shamans to Jesus. There were ancient Egyptian gods. I had no idea what their names were. There was Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, white buffalo calf woman, angels, departed loved ones. I even saw the disciples that followed Jesus, and they called him the shepherd. They said that the shepherd was overseeing these changes that were occurring on Earth's evolution to a higher vibrational state. The messengers told me that others would be able to also experience these realms. This was part of our evolution, that there would be changes in our genetic makeup that would allow us to experience these dimensions. There was also a group known as the Keepers of the Flame, and they would help humans assimilate these new energies. Now, I have no idea whether that would be humans or spirits from their realms, but they would help with the assimilation. The vision faded. That dial, that slider moved back in the direction of my physical body, and I slipped from the vision to become the observer. And I watched as my body in that lotus position floated back down to earth like a feather. I opened my eyes and I was fully back in my physical body. But Donna, and you do understand this, something had changed in me. I felt this awesome energy of peace, of stillness, of balance. And I thought about that one sentence, I am perfect balance and harmony. And I realized I was, just by being in that space where the realms of light exist. I became balanced. I became peace. I became stillness. Donna, this is something I've given a lot of thought to over the years, and you've been there too. We both have extraordinary experiences, visions where our POEs leave our physical body and we zoom across the galaxies. We feel that unity, that oneness with all that is. It's so hard to put a label on something that is so profound. These experiences may not last long. Sometimes it's just a few minutes. But when we return, we're changed. As our POE dials back to be the observer, and then farther down the scale to be in our physical bodies, we realize we're different. We are no longer who we were before the experience. We bring parts of these non-physical energy systems with us. Now, maybe that's not what happens. Maybe it's that our energy makeup changes, our frequencies, our vibrations entrain with the energies of the non-physical. I'm not too sure what happens. You know, do we literally become in tune with their vibrations? All I know is we change, and it's very powerful and profound.
Yeah, it's really true. And for me, I think if we want to talk in terms of what changed physically, so I'll tell one is a physical change and one that I can't explain. But physically, there was a change in my skin. So I don't know what's happened to my skin, but I can feel time. I've said this before, I can feel time on my skin. I can feel our connections on my skin. And then my senses, I think, like you said, I think like became awake or sharper. But and again, I don't know, I can't explain if it's something that happened over there and I brought back with me, or it doesn't really matter. It's just that you come back and you're changed. How can you not? Yeah. So we've gone from Jesus, Candy, we've gone from Jesus to meeting all sorts of ascended masters, religious icons. Recently, I was at a conference with Suzanne Giesman. She talked about when she was over there, she was able to meet with Odin and said, how can I meet with you, Odin? You're a mythical figure. And Odin looked at her in the eyes and said, you're a mythical figure to us.
I love it.
So just a few days later, you meet another master while you're there, someone when you're in the realms of light, but you've never heard of before. And I love this evidence. I love that these experiences happen to you because they're happening to you and you go, I don't know what this is. So here's another example. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, halfway down page 175. I had felt this divine feminine energy around me for several days, but she didn't come forward. Now, that usually means it's not that she didn't come forward. It means that I'm not in the right space to receive that message. Remember, the messengers told us in the last episode, chapter 8, the Crystalline Grid, that their connection is always clear. If there's anything that's fuzzy, it's me. It's because of my connection to them. So on December 15th, Kuan Yin comes in, first telling me her name and then her purpose on earth. Now, two things are key here. I had never heard of the name Kuan Yin, but I found out she is known as a goddess of mercy in the Buddhist religion, like Mother Mary's counterpart. And then secondly, she brings up her role in the birthing of Gaia, Mother Earth Spirit, as she transitions. And the second paragraph on page 176, Kuan Yin says that Gaia is the mother, and she, Kuan Yin, is just about one of the midwives, and they are here to help with the rebirth of the universe. Now, Donna, once again, reviewing these messages years later, I'm finding a different perspective. Throughout the book, the messengers talk about our lives changing on Earth and saying that we wouldn't recognize as Earth evolves. And I always thought that these evolutionary changes would be in the future, 50 years, 500 years, 5,000 years. I realize now they're talking about current times. And just look at the evidence. Look at how our lives have changed since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. This is part of Earth's transformation as she ramps up her energy to higher vibrational states. This is a clarion call. This is a time for introspection, to look at our own lives and determine how we can make a difference. Do we look for the good? Our choices and decisions that we make are part of this balance that Earth seeks. Do we find ourselves as united, as one? Do we see humanity as our brothers and sisters linked together across this globe? Or do we isolate ourselves and think of me, me, me? Kuan Yin says she is calling on the divine feminine within each of us to help in this birthing movement, this birthing of Mother Earth. So what does this mean? I mean, is it time for the divine feminine to lead? Is it time to bring heart energy into the formula? The messengers are always talking about that, but no longer force and power, but instead using love and compassion. Is it time to nurture? I would think so.
Yeah, I think so too, Candy. You know, you tell us at the top of page 176, you'd never heard of Kuan Yin. And then you had to Google her. This is so true of this pattern, you know, that they tell you something and then you Google it and then you find out she's the goddess of mercy in Buddhist religion, a connection to Buddha. And it's the validation that comes after the fact. But I love how these messages are timeless. They gave you these messages years before the pandemic and embedded them and given us this roadmap of how the Ascended Masters are helping us through Gaia's transition, through her evolution, and what a message of hope that is. And now you're going to see a procession of the divine feminine. And you saw this while you're in meditation at the Church of Spiritual Life. And folks, we're on page 176 and 177. So you have to realize when she's getting these messages, when she's writing them down, and how it is connected to what's happening right now. So in comes the procession of the women, and women shall lead with love. It's a call for unity. And you're at the Church of Unity. You're in unity too. You actually saw the energy flowing across this room. I want to hear about that energy that you saw.
Sure, Donna. I had gone to Church of Spiritual Light for meditation. And when I arrived, there were two altars, one on the east wall and another across from it on the west wall of the room. As soon as I took my seat, I saw these powerful waves of energy stream upward from each altar. They met, blended, fused together, and then they swirled around the room and they touched everyone and everything there. And that's when I saw the procession of the divine feminine. When they spoke, there was a shift in the room. You could feel it. Then I saw pink energy, very soft pastel pink energy float down from the ceiling. And it's like it had tendrils and it reached out and connected to every single person at that meditation. I looked back up to the ceiling and noticed where that pink energy had begun, there was a splash of red. I immediately knew it represented blood. It was both the red of the flow of menses and the red of blood from the heart. Next came the messages about now being the time that the role of the feminine is honored. It was that clarion call to come forth and lead through love. It was a call for unity and the divine. It was awakening to the divinity within. It was beautiful.
And I think it's powerful that there's altars there. Can you talk a little bit about the altars in that vision too?
Oh, yes. The altars had been set up for something that they had done like the week before. I asked Reverend Bledsoe about it after the meditation. I shared my experience, And I said, well, tell me about these altars, because the streams of energy came from them. She said they were part of a Buddhist Wesak, and I may not be pronouncing that correctly. There's more than one way to pronounce it, but a Wesak ceremony. And the Wesak ceremony is celebrated to honor the birth, enlightenment, and death of the Buddha. And I thought, oh goodness, there's that connection to Buddha again. Now, I researched later and discovered from Alice Bailey's book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, that describes Wesak as a time when two great streams of energy, one from Jesus and the other from Buddha, were fused and blended for the mutual balancing for humanity. I couldn't help but smile. The description matched my experiences verbatim and validated for me that this experience was true and genuine.
And again, you're getting the validation with your research and what you saw, and then how it was worded. Two streams of energy that fused and blended, and that's what you saw and matched verbatim what you had written in real time with the vision. You know, we love to say here, you can't make this up.
Right.
Yeah. So it's crazy. It's just wonderfully crazy. And we're getting toward the end of the chapter, but the chapter ends with another connection to ascended masters. So we're going over to page 179, and you attended an angel meditation. And when you did, you found yourself in the center of a Merkaba. And remember, it's a star tetrahedron. It's one of the sacred geometries. It's a spinning, it's three-dimensional shape. It's formed by two, if you can envision, two pyramids, one pointing up and the other one pointing down, but you're in the center of that. We talked about that before. And what it cracks me up is that you didn't even know what a Merkaba was. You're in this. And so the message that accompanied this vision is worth reviewing. So just real quick, June 7th, 2016, I'll go through it. It's just saying that it calls a Merkaba a body of light. You're in the Merkaba, and it says you are empowered with divine light. And this light, this Merkaba, says it's the light that led the wise men to the Christ. So all these connections, and it's in the last paragraph that says it all. I'm going to read it to you. We give you this roadmap. It is yours. It is within you and always has been. We have only lit the path for you to see. You must take the first step upon this path of wisdom. We are with you. We shall remain by your side as you traverse this path for which you are destined. This thing I like about this book and who you are and what the messengers is, they gave these tools. They lit the path. They have the roadmap. Should you choose, and again, it's a choice, choose to follow. You're with us now on episode 20, so you've been with us for a long time. So, we want you to know you can use the Merkaba to follow the path of enlightenment. And this book really is about learning to use these tools. This isn't just to listen to us and go, oh, that's nice. You have to use them. Isn't that right, Candy?
That is so true. And I love how this goes back to choice. Remember your NDE? It was all about choice. You gave your choice to God, and it comes back to you. It is your choice and what you will do with that. When I researched the Merkaba later, that's when I discovered that it was described as a divine vehicle of light that's used by ascended masters to connect with higher realms. And it's like, oh my gosh, isn't that exactly what happened to me? I was in the realms of light meeting with ascended masters, and there was this Merkaba that I had no idea what it was. But it reminds me of yet another tool that we have. We have so many tools that we've been blessed with by the messengers. But I was thinking about the emotional guidance system that we talked about chapters ago. And that's like an internal GPS that shows us the way, just as the ascended masters are lighting the way for us. But that's only a guidepost. It's a suggestion. The light shows us the path, but the choice is ours to make.
Yeah, and don't give that choice away. Or if the only person you're going to give the choice to, it's a good one to give it to God. But
Right.
I can't think of
Good
more.
choice.
Yeah, it's a good choice. Yeah. And when I fell back to earth after I realized I was going to live, he goes, a good answer.
That's right. I forgot that.
I can't think of a more perfect way to end this chapter in this episode. I want to thank you, Candy, for sharing with us. I want to thank our listeners for joining us as we unleash the stories behind the reluctant messenger and release the stories behind our friendship. Now, as a teacher, on the next episode, we're going to be covering chapter 10, I Dreamed a Dream, another really fascinating chapter, but I'm going to give you a little bit different homework tonight. So here's your homework. You to read chapter 10 ahead of time. Okay. But another thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to sit down and make a list of all the tools that we've talked about as we unleash this book. I want you to see and have in front of you your toolkit. That's your homework. Read and make your toolbox.
I love it, Donna. Thank you. And Donna, I want to thank you for hosting this. You know, we're wrapping up the book. We only have two more chapters after this.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone else for following us. We invite you, as usual, to subscribe, like the episodes, leave comments, and share our channel on your social media. And remember, this year, my mantra is be kind. Being kind to one another, that's what life is all about. And that is what we're hearing from the messengers as well, too. So until next time.